Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment, but here today is Marc Garbar. He's discussing a topic we all have an opinion on, and for some of us, a fear: sexual harassment, and a possible way of protecting both employer and employee. Marc, welcome to the program.
Yes, Don. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, we start always by asking our guests, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your company, and where people can reach you via your website.
Sure. So, my company, I work for a law firm, and what the topic today, as you mentioned, sexual harassment. I created not just a website, but also an app, and they're both identified as harassment law. It's one word. So either harassmentlaw.com or the phrase harassment law on both the Apple and Google products. And it is a resource for both employer and employee to utilize to obtain information, to learn how to better educate themselves on different aspects of employment law, whether it be sexual harassment, discrimination, or anything under that employment law umbrella. And in the event of needing some 911 serious issue type of information or contact, the app and website offer 24/7 attorney access, whereby an 800 number is provided, and if somebody needed to speak with an attorney on an ASAP basis, that is certainly provided, and that toll-free number is 8334-HARASS.
Well, you certainly got that area covered, and we can go in a lot of different directions, but I'll start with the basic one. Employers right now, I sat down at a conference last week, and a group of employers were sitting around, and they said their number one issue, fear, besides the fact of where the next sale was going to come from, was that somebody was going to file some sort of harassment suit, and that the moderator said that the number of harassment suits had doubled in the last year. What do you say to someone leading a company facing those facts?
So, first of all, I'm not surprised at the increasing number. Clearly, this area has gotten a lot more media exposure over the last, I would estimate, about 10 months or so, since October of 2017, when all the stories about Harvey Weinstein started to break and everything that followed. Sexual harassment became a very popular topic, not necessarily a good one, but certainly a popular one in terms of the amount of discussions that were occurring about it. In terms of how to deal when somebody files a complaint, whether it be externally in a court of law or even internally, the small business owner, especially the small business owner, really has a challenging decision to make at that point, and those decisions really need to be streamlined into consulting with legal counsel in terms of what steps they need to take. So for an external one, it's pretty simple, right? If somebody files a complaint in court, the business owner should immediately hire an attorney and discuss any known facts to he or she at that time, and allow the attorney to do whatever he or she does best, and that is to deal with those kinds of complaints that are filed in court. But a more strategic approach, and this is more on the internal complaint that's filed, it's something that a business owner could potentially deal with and resolve without allowing it to get to the next level, which is that, again, that external complaint in court. And the way that the business owner can deal with that internally is, number one, try to resolve the matter. So if somebody complains about, let's say, a coworker that he or she believes was harassing he or she, him or her, then that the business owner, the person that's making the decisions at that company, needs to sit down with the alleged person that is making the allegations about the harassment, understand what occurred, and investigate. And whether they investigate it on their own, whether they hire an outside company to do so, needs to be investigated. And as a result of that investigation, the business owner then needs to make decisions based upon the facts that are known and what to do, if anything, disciplinary-wise, regarding the alleged harasser. Now, a business owner, of course, needs to be careful because the amount of exposure that they could open up potentially could even be larger than the initial complaint. If, by way of example, a complaint of harassment occurs, business owner deals with it, business owner fires the alleged harasser. Okay, that's fine. But now, months later, another harassment complaint arises from a different employee about a different harasser. And in this situation, even though the facts seem very similar, because that alleged harasser is a better breadwinner for the business owner decides that, okay, for this individual, we will only provide a slap on the wrist or some sort of a dock in pay or something minor. Now, even if that happens, not a big deal. Where it becomes a big deal is if the person that was terminated was, let's say, had a different skin color than the second alleged harasser, was older, was a different gender, and all of a sudden, now the business owner potentially opens themselves up to future litigation because they did not act in a consistent manner when it comes to dealing with harassing type of claims. So clearly, Don, I know we only have a few minutes here, but clearly this is a very complicated area of the law, especially for anyone listening that might not be a lawyer, that might not have ever dealt with an issue like this, but could certainly be dealing with an issue like this in the future if certain I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and T's are not crossed properly. So all I can suggest is speaking with an attorney. I've created a website and app that could provide some resource for that purpose. And by all means, any questions that are ongoing, please always feel free to call that 800 number I provided and ask anything. I'd be happy to assist in any way possible.
Well, Mark, let's delve a little deeper. I'm not an attorney. I know just enough law to be dangerous. But, I look at it, and every situation is different. And it seems, and it also seems that the pendulum has swung to me 180 degrees. That the person that's been harassed now seems to have the benefit of the doubt, and the harasser doesn't seem to stand a chance, whether male or female, as we've had a couple of them in recent times. But to me, the number one thing is the employer should always act the same, be consistent in what he or she does in these areas. And as you say, it's true. But how does one identify these issues? One man's pat on the shoulder is maybe a woman's harassment. How does one establish standards or find standards?
Right. So, really, the key, in real estate, Don, everybody knows the true word of real estate. The key word is location, right? Everybody says it 3 times: location, location, location. For a business owner, the key word is documentation. And whether you say it 3 times or 3,000 times, it's so important because, as you mentioned, right, it appears that the employee is given the benefit of the benefit of the doubt, and that even when an allegation is made, regardless of its truth, the employer is guilty before it even says a word, right? That's kind of the public perception. So a way to avoid that, or one of the ways to avoid that, or at least minimize it a bit, is for that business owner to document anything going on with that employee. So when an employee is not properly doing his or her work, when that employee is late, when the employee is not showing up to work, or things are going on, it's so important that the business owner documents it. And also, if any sort of internal complaint is made, same thing, documentation, because if it's not documented, and down the road, an allegation is made, and the business owner says, well, you told me about it, but you told me it was not that big of a deal, and that you did not want me to investigate, you did not want me to look into it, you didn't want me to do anything. The employee says, I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened. And that's because it wasn't properly documented. And even when, switching gears a bit to more of a discrimination type claim, if someone's claiming I was discriminated against because of the color of my skin, my age, my race, gender, what have you, there's so many different categories, and that person says you treated me differently on account of, again, that fill in the blank category, business owner can come back and say, well, I did not, and here's documented proof that we disciplined you on such and such date because you, again, showed up late, you weren't here, you did this, you did that, whatever the case might be, and we gave you a warning. We said if it ever happened again, we would take action, and then it happened again, so that's why we took the action we did. That would be a pretty good defense to somebody saying, you fired me because of, again, fill in the blank, skin color, age, race, what have you. So that's why it's so important, again, another tool in the box for the business owner to document everything going on, even if it feels a little uncomfortable, because it's challenging sometimes to document everything going on with your employee. But without proper documentation, from a legal perspective, it's as though it never existed, because no matter what the business owner then says down the road that the employee said or did not say, I mean, it's an easy layup for the employee just to say that didn't happen. And whether it did or not, again, it's not a matter of truth, it's a matter of where does the public perception burden lie? And the public perception, as you mentioned, is, well, the employee said it, and in today's times, it's the truth, and as a result, we're now going to start banning a business or causing social media chaos for an employer. It could be really bad and devastating for a business owner. That's why it's so key for documentation, and really starting in the beginning, trying to hire the right personnel, have an employee handbook in place, and just to establish good relationships with those employees on an ongoing basis.
Well, let me stop you right there. First off, your website again and your app for people.
Sure, Don.
We're talking with Marc Garbar, but please tell us your website.
Right. So the website again is harassmentlaw.com, and the app simply Harassment Law, one word, and it can be found on both Google and Apple, and it also coupled with a 24/7 attorney access hotline, and the 800 number for that access is 833, the number 4, harass. So it's 833-4 harass.
Well, let me ask you two questions. One, if I call up as a layperson for advice, whatever I discuss with that attorney, is that privilege?
So, good question. So the answer is yes, but not that there are exceptions, but the answer is yes, but it doesn't mean that there's yet an attorney-client relationship. So if somebody were to call my office this afternoon and we were to engage in a dialogue about those person's problems, so that way I could determine whether or not I could help, that conversation certainly is privileged. doesn't mean that there's an attorney-client relationship born yet. That occurs through a retainer agreement, through an understanding reached between an attorney and a client. But in terms of the initial communication, yes, that would be considered privilege.
Well, that's always good to know. Well, my
Sure.
second question is, how did you get such a great website, Harassment Law? Was it available, or did you have to pay for it? Because another side, we had another guest on recently talking about websites, and it's such a great one. I'm surprised no one had taken it before.
Well, Don, I've been practicing law about 23 years, and so I started in 1995, and I think it was either 96 or 97 during the early stages of the internet and websites, what have you, that I purchased the domain name of harassmentlaw.com, and I've been using it on and off for the last 20 or so years. And I've certainly, now with the creation of the app, I've certainly started to utilize the two together, and that just started really just about 2 months ago.
Well, congratulations. That is really thinking ahead, and really wonderful. Let's go on now. In many cases, I've seen there seems to be a feeling that men are using their perceived power to force women to do things. But do you see that increasing, or it's just that people are reporting it more?
Okay, another good question. So when you say power, do you mean in terms of exchanging promises for favors, or are we talking more of creating a hostile work environment? Because those are two different things. So let me break that down for your audience.
Let's separate them. You're absolutely right, and we should talk about it separately.
So the first is something called quid pro quo. That's a Latin term that means something for something. And quite simply, this goes back to the old days, although those old days seem to be resurfacing very recently, whereby, again, to use a very stereotypical type of situation where you have the male professional and his female secretary, receptionist, what have you. Again, we're going back many years, where that person in power, as you mentioned, says, well, I'll give you a raise if you, again, fill in the blank with any sort of sexual favor you'd like. But that's kind of what we're talking about in a quid pro quo. Something for something. I'll give you a raise if you, again, fill in the blank. Or I won't fire you if you, again, fill in the blank. So that's kind of more the quid pro quo type of harassment. Now, that's not the more popular kind. For the last many years, that's more the hostile work environment, which I'll mention in a moment. But what came out in the news last October and in many stories since then goes back to, again, that quid pro quo. And from a Hollywood perspective, that casting couch, where, well, if you do, again, XYZ, fill in the blank, I'll put you in my next movie, or I'll make you a producer, I'll do whatever. That's, again, that quid pro quo. The other type of sexual harassment, or any type of harassment from that standpoint, is the hostile work environment. And this is where, maybe you use the word power, but this is where it comes into play, where we'll use, again, stereotypical men and women here, where a woman feels uncomfortable at the workplace because whether there be ongoing dirty jokes being told between the business owner, between and he and all the other male colleagues, and a female individual is made to feel inferior, made to feel not wanted, made to feel in a very uncomfortable situation, whether it be email jokes, whatever it might be, it causes uncomfortableness for that female individual, and that's where hostile work environment evolves. Now, hostile is a very meaning often used, but not quite understood term. So when someone says they've been harassed or they're in a hostile work environment, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are, unless the harassment or that environment is being caused based upon somebody's gender, age, race, again, fill in the blank on those types of categories. If somebody, meaning a business owner, is just a mean SOB, that's not unlawful. So it becomes unlawful from a perception or perspective of harassment when the business owner is, let's say, just really mean or really curses out only the female employees, but does not do so, or is high-fiving the male employees. There you have a disparity of how those folks are being treated. What's not unlawful is when the business owner, as I mentioned earlier on, is just a mean SOB and just curses all day long. Cursing in a work environment is not a hostile work environment. It's not harassment. If that business owner is treating everybody the same way, you used earlier, Don, you used the word consistent. If that business owner treats everybody in the same fashion, consistently, is always mean, is always cursing, no matter who he's speaking with, whether it be male, female, somebody older, somebody younger, somebody black, somebody white, doesn't matter. That's not unlawful. He's not treating somebody differently on account of their protected characteristic, and as a result, he's not causing a hostile work environment, because to do so would have to be based upon somebody's protected characteristic. In a situation like that, I would certainly tell the business owner, not a good idea to do any of those things, but if you're going to do it universally. And that way, be able to minimize the amount of trouble he or she can get in.
I remember Jerry Kramer in his book saying about Vince Lombardi. Yeah, he was cruel. He treated us all like dogs. But at least he was consistent about it.
Right, that's the point. And maybe, again, you don't want to, I'm not suggesting that anybody treats their employees like dogs or any other, thought process or anything else. We want to treat everybody with respect and dignity. But if you can't help yourself, and if you just you have the need to just drop F-bombs and all kinds of other bombs throughout the day, just do it universally. That would be my only suggestion in that situation. Doesn't mean someone's still not going to file a complaint about it. They certainly could. But when anyone else is called in as a witness and everybody says, yeah, this is how he treats everybody, that business owner could be in a much better position at that point than he or she would be if he or she treated employees differently on account of their gender, race, age, sexual orientation, or whatever protected characteristic that might be.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Mark, and they say about men, jokes, etc. Yet when women get together, they sometimes tell worse jokes than the men have ever even thought of. And yet it seems that, quote, the men are the only ones that create a hostile environment. But I myself had an experience many years ago. As a young boy of 8 or 9, I attended one of the last football weddings. I don't know if you're old enough to remember when you used to make sandwiches beforehand and throw them out at the wedding guests at the dinner. But it was between an Italian bride and a Polish groom. And in those days, marriages like that were frowned upon by both groups. And in telling the story, which, by the way, was published recently in a major national magazine, one day in a work environment, I was brought up by a woman who felt, quote, offended by my bringing up the fact that there was a Polish and a Polish-American wedding, Polish-Italian wedding. And to this day, I still shudder at the thought of that. And one man's meat is another man's potatoes. How do you deal with that, Mark?
Well, you're talking about it, I'm assuming, a non-employment type situation, right? You're just talking about it through everyday conversation, somebody feeling offended.
No.
By somebody else.
I was inside. We were at a story meeting, and one of the editors, we got to talking. It happened that I don't know. It started out. We were doing a bridal issue for this magazine, and I brought up the story, and then and told a story about this couple, and what eventually happened to the couple, etc. And the next day, I'm brought up before the president of the company, saying I had created a hostile environment.
Yeah,
and
that's so. The question is, what do I think about that? I mean, it's these days, right? Everybody, it appears, is overly sensitive, and I think you mentioned earlier on about men, women. So men, women equally are often offended when perhaps they shouldn't be, or perhaps they just are, because they believe things should be different than the way you describe them. So talking about a Polish wedding or an Italian this or a Jewish that or whatever the case might be, by going down a path like that and adding in, just going from just discussing a wedding between persons of different background to describing it as, well, one was Polish and one was Italian. I'm not saying it sounds offensive. It certainly doesn't. But that doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree with that. And because somebody could say, well, I'm offended as somebody who's Polish, I'm offended as somebody who's Italian, because he or she is viewing it as though you're talking about it in a negative way. And surely, and I'm saying certainly, I'm sure you did not intend to do that. Certainly that was not what you were doing. You were just telling a story. But again, as you talked about meat and potatoes, everybody's perceptions are different. Yes. So because of that perception, now you find yourself talking to the president of a company where I'm sure when you even said it or in a few minutes before or even after, that was the last thing you thought could ever happen by simply sharing a story. But in today's world, it seems that there's a lot of oversensitivity going on in the public, certainly at workplaces. That those things are going to happen. And when those things do occur and they end up in front of the president of the company, again, that president needs to now make decisions. What to do, what not to do. How do I deal with this situation? And what if it was worse? What if it wasn't worse? And again, it comes down to consistently investigating and making prompt remedial decisions based upon what is occurring. And hopefully in that situation, nothing occurred to your employment. I don't think it certainly should have. But again, if that president was dealing with, coming off other issues that had recently happened and in a zero tolerance environment, you never know. It could lead to discipline, if not worse.
Yeah, very definitely. It didn't with me, but I've always told the story, and there's a lot more to that story. But Mark, we're unfortunately coming to the end of this. Your website again and how people can reach you, because you are helping in a very, very important area, and we're so glad you joined us.
Don, it's my pleasure, and thank you again. The website is...
Go ahead. Tell me the website.
Okay, sure. The website's harassmentlaw.com. The app is Harassment Law, and the 800 number associated with both for 24/7 attorney access is 833, the number 4, harass. So it will be 833-4-harass.
Marc Garbar, thank you so much for being with us. It's been illuminating. You can hit a link to your website is going to be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this, every other past and future program. And you can also, by the way, tell us guests you might like to hear on the program. Marc Garbar, thank you so much for being with us.
Dan Perkins here from recalculating.biz. I want to tell you about Bob Bethel. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. Dan Perkins with your featured book.
Don Mazzella, my co-host Dan Perkins, is on assignment. But in its place, we have a really fascinating guest, David Juniper. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, as we ask all of our guests, tell us first a little bit about your personal background, a little bit about your company, and then before we go into everything, your website. So the floor is all yours.
Okay, thanks, Don. Yeah, as you said, I'm David Juniper, and you probably tell from my accent, I'm English. I moved over to the US a couple of years ago to launch our cybersecurity event series. Prior to that, I was working on our UK events. We have a series of IT and cybersecurity events based in Europe, in London and in Sweden. And so I was running the cybersecurity event version in London, and then moved over to San Francisco about 2 years ago to launch our cybersecurity event series over here, which is taking place in Chicago, Atlanta, and Dallas this year. I'm the director of events for that series, so overseeing those series of events, looking after the sales, the operations, the marketing, and the content that we provide to our attendees, and looking after our exhibitors and the overall show that we put on.
Well, and your website for the events?
So we have 3 separate events. So we have www.cybersecurity-chicago.com, and then cybersecurity-atlanta.com, and then cybersecurity-dallas.com. So there are our 3 events that we run in the US.
It takes a lot for especially a small business owner to up and go to an event like yours, which, by the way, I happen to believe you should be, having just suffered through my own cybersecurity event. But why should they go to an event like this, and what can they learn from it?
Oh, well, the knowledge that you can learn from one of these events, from the speakers, from the vendors that will be there, and also your peers, the networking opportunity to learn off of other people, what other pains, what other issues, from all company sizes, but certainly from a small or medium-sized business. A lot of people think that cyber attacks just affect those big ones, those big organizations, those big companies that make the headlines. But as you alluded to there, it can affect any type of organization, any type of business, and it's always changing. The landscape of cybersecurity is moving at a great pace. It's an arms race. The attackers are getting more sophisticated, as well as the technology to stop them. And every organization, be it small or large, has something to protect. So that might be their intellectual property, their customers' data, their own personal data, something that would be stored within their system that they need to protect. And the damage that can cause can be great from a PR point of view, from a business point of view, and can take a long while to recover. And by coming to these types of events, that you have an opportunity to learn from the experts, the people that are dealing with this day in, day out, and you can really, learn from that and bring that home into your business. And these types of events are geared for you to have takeaways. So you can go to, see multiple sessions across the 2 days, and there being lots of takeaways, lots of things that you can do and then implement once you get back to your organization. So the 2 days that you take out coming to our conference, I think, would be well spent in terms of what you can then do going forward, and the things that you will learn to make sure that you have a much securer network, the practice that you put in place. And it's not necessarily that it's around the technology that you need to have. It might be just a way of thinking, the way that you put best practice, maybe making small changes to an organization can make a big impact on protecting what you have.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, let's go in a different direction, and let's talk about events in general. Let's turn it around. Some people have talked about it with me about should they be an exhibitor at an event, whether it's your type of show or occurs for clothing manufacturers, etc. But when someone comes to you and says, "Should I be a participant in the show? Should I rent a booth?" What do you say to them as the reasons why someone should be at an event offering their wares?
Well, again, there's multiple reasons, but one of the greatest thing is having that face-to-face time. A lot of these companies want to do business with our audience, so we attract by putting on the content, having the big keynote speakers that we have, and the educational stuff that we put on. We attract really strong senior decision makers from all organisations and from different sizes. And to those exhibitors, they have an opportunity to take a booth and have real face time with these people that make the decisions about what technologies, what services, and products that they will then implement within their system. And as we know across all walks of life, that face-to-face time with people is really key. Giving an opportunity to demo, that might be through a live demo on a computer, or being sit down and talk around their issues that they have and how that potential product may help them, which goes a lot further than maybe an email or something in the post, or hopefully they'll see an advert in a print publication or clicking on an ad on a website. Hopefully they'll come across your website. By having that face-to-face time, that chance to actually go through it, understand that customer's needs, it goes a lot further than those other mediums that I mentioned.
That's true. Well, let's go even further afield. You're an Englishman. We won't hold that against you. You're here in the States. What have you found as some of the differences of marketing here in the States versus doing it in Europe, et cetera?
I think it's the same thing, really. I think both on both sides there, what people are trying to do is connect businesses with opportunities, and that's what we're trying to do here. There's obviously the market here is much bigger. There's a lot more organisations from lots of different industries, but ultimately at these events we're trying to connect customers with our exhibitors and for them to do business. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's too much. I mean, based on our event last year, we had a really good turn-up rate. So people that actually registered, that came and actually turned up to the event, because sometimes with these events you do get a bit of a drop-off in terms of actually people coming on a day because things turn up. So maybe that's something that Americans have, is that once they commit to something, they see it through and make sure that they come rather than dropping off.
Well, is attendance free, or is it a charge for attending?
There is a charge. So we have two levels of ticket price. So we have a keynote pass. So that gets you access to our keynote conference across the 2 days. And that's where our sort of headline speakers are. So within Chicago, we have Teresa Payton, who was the first female to serve as the White House as a chief operating officer, and also she's the star of the TV show Hunted. And so she's going to be talking around the hyper reality, workplace, around how that connects to blockchain, cryptocurrency, AI, machine learning. And then we have another speaker, will be George Beebe, who's the director of Intelligence and National Security for the Center of National Interest. And he's going to be looking at the US cyber war with Russia and the role that US businesses have to play in that. So that's where you get to see those type of speakers. And then we have another ticket price, which gives you access to some other content, of the breakout theatres, which cover topics such as cloud security, mobile security, identity and access management, IoT, the future of cyber technologies. But the keynote pass also then gets you access to the expo hall, where we will be, all of our vendors will be having their booths, etc. So,
no, keep going.
Go ahead.
I was only going to say, we here at this program think cybersecurity is so very important, and we've been hitting it very hard with a group of people like yourself coming on the program talking about it. In fact, I got an email the other day from someone that said perhaps you're hammering at it too much, and I don't think that's the case, because I think cybersecurity is so critically important in this day and age. What do you say to that?
So certainly, and that's why we continue to grow our event series, and what we're doing is taking our expo and conference to different cities. So we started off with Chicago, and then we're going to be back there again this year, and then we're now taking it to Atlanta and Dallas, and then looking to take that to some further cities in 2019. So we certainly feel that it's important to keep raising the awareness, and one of the things we've always talked around is around those small to medium sized companies who sometimes think that it's not necessarily a hot or an issue that they need to cover. But we see all the time these different breaches, and that happens. We hear about the big ones because obviously they make the headlines, but they're happening all the time. Not just for companies, but for personal, people, with credit cards and bank accounts and information being taken and being used. I think everyone needs to be aware of it, from not just on a corporate level, but also on a personal level, making sure that you're secure when you're connecting to free Wi-Fi or and things like that, where you're sharing your data and the passwords that you use, and just getting best practice and making sure. And the more that we do these types of events, the more the people like yourself talk around these types of stuff, the more people will get educated, and the more secure we'll be, and there'll be less of these breaches. As I mentioned, it is a bit of a race against, because everyone's trying to, the technologies and the way that things are hacked, they're always improving. But hopefully, if we can get the basics right, then we can maybe stop or slow down that process.
I couldn't agree with you more. I got totally wiped out by a malicious virus, and I've had to rebuild my entire system. Thank God I had a backup, independent backup, but it is still a very trying time. David, your websites again for people who are listening in, and the dates for these events.
Yeah, so our Cybersecurity Chicago event is taking place at McCormick Place on the 26th to 27th of September this year, and the website is www.cybersecurity-chicago.com. Then our Atlanta event is taking place on the 17th and 18th of October at the Georgia World Congress Center, and that's cybersecurity-atlanta.com. And then our Dallas event is taking place on the 31st of October to the 1st of November at the Gaylord Texan Resort and Convention Center, and that one is cybersecurity-dallas.com.
Well, we have a few minutes now. What are some of the exhibitors you have coming to the show, and why did they come to the show? Well, I know we already said it, but why do these specific people, what do they have to offer?
So, I mean, they're these the same ways with the technologies are always being improved and bringing out new products and new services that they offer, new add-ons. So these companies are looking to grow their customer database. There, and also being, meet their existing customers. That's always a great thing to do is meet your existing customers, talk around any issues they may have, and any new services or opportunities they might be able to help with. So, we have exhibitors such as IBM Security, Cisco Security, Fortinet, Symantec, Trace, SentinelOne, SailPoint, across the whole industry of cybersecurity. So, as I mentioned earlier, network security companies, cloud security, identity and access management, IoT, DevOps. There is a wide range of vendors that will be exhibiting and speaking at the event, and that's why I was saying it's so important that people come to these types of events to learn from these organizations that are doing this stuff day in, day out, and learn and hear about what they're doing.
Well, a recent survey we did and backed up by another survey, the small businesses in our audience is 59% of our audience are owners and or presidents. they still have this fear of going into the cloud. It's more and more receding, but it's still there. And one of their big areas is the security in the cloud. What do you see in this area, and what are the types of vendors you're seeing at your show and elsewhere to assuage this fear?
I mean, part of that, digital transformation, which is one of those key words at the moment, and people moving over to the cloud, and I get there are concerns around that, but a lot of those companies that I've mentioned have very strong products and services that they can offer to make that transition as painless, and also to confirm that those security concerns that they've got the services and the products and the technologies to protect that, and the cost savings from I'm no expert on cloud and things like that, but the cost savings that organizations can have by moving their companies to the cloud, I understand are great. So, but you need to understand the security risks, and that's why these types of events, speaking to those types of organizations, doing your research, understanding what you need to put in place, what impact that would have on your organization if you were to do it, how long it would take, what measures, that's the conversations that you need to be having, the research, and as we've already touched on, by going to these types of things where you can go to, we have a theatre around cloud security, go in, listen to those people, ask questions, go and see what products are available, and hopefully those experts will be able to ease those concerns that you have around the risk of moving to the cloud.
What do you see are the differences between your experiences in Europe and the questions and the outlook of European base versus American base? Do you notice any differences in how business leaders go about cybersecurity?
I think it's the same world over. I think as the cybersecurity issue has been around for a number of years, and I'm sure a lot of IT directors or heads of IT or people who look after IT within organizations have been banging that drum for a number of years, and as we've seen, it's definitely become more of a board issue, more of a company owner or a president owner's issue now, as these types of attacks get more exposure within the media, the high profile, the impact that it has as a business. It's definitely seen it being more of a board members or owners taking note of this and asking questions, and CIOs and CISOs now getting a seat at the table to talk around this, and as people increase their spend in this area. But I think that issue, to go back to your question, I think is world, it's across the whole world. I think it's certainly been the same. That it's definitely been a slow burner, but now, as we've seen over the recent years, it's certainly become much more of a company-wide issue or a board issue, rather than it just being an IT or a cybersecurity issue within that IT team. It's much wider than that now.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time together. Your websites again on these three events. I keep asking you because it's so important. I think cybersecurity is so important. That's why we have you on the program, and that's why we want to hear your sites again.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we've got a number of really good keynote speakers across all three of our events. So I recommend, if you're in one of those areas or close to one of these locations, have a look at our website, have a look at those speakers, look at the organizations that are exhibiting, think about your organization and what issues you have and what products and services you feel that you need, and come to these events and learn and network and build your own knowledge of cybersecurity. So it's cybersecurity-chicago.com, cybersecurity-atlanta.com, and then cybersecurity-dallas.com.
We've been talking with David Juniper. He's been a fascinating guest. We'll have a link to one or all of his websites on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future program. David, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You know, Dan, I've been dealing with diabetes my entire life. My grandmother had it. My mother and all my aunts had it. And unfortunately, I have it. I've had adult onset of diabetes for over 20 years. And medical science is making terrific progress in helping people understand how to prevent it, and if it does onset, how to control it. And you have some interesting information that you want to share with our audience. So
first thing I want to share is that about a week ago or so, I was also diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, and I only have one person that I know of in my family, and that's my brother. My two sisters do not have any diabetes. It was a scary thing to learn. When you go to the diabetes classes at the hospitals and they start talking about all the things that can happen to you with diabetes, it's a serious disease, and you can only treat it. You cannot cure it. And forced me to decide to want to learn more about the disease that I had. And I found some startling information. America diagnoses 1.3 Americans every year, new patients of diabetes. We have over 30 million, almost 10% of the entire population of the United States is diagnosed as having diabetes. And the scary part is about 30% of the people who have it have not yet been diagnosed. And you were talking about diet. That's the one thing that I'm getting used to. But as I talked to the dietitians who were teaching the classes, the incidence of adult diabetes happening into children is exploding, and the number of children in the United States that are obese and who are already now being treated, not very often in the case of type 1, which is insulin dependent, but there's just an enormous number of people that are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And right now, they estimate if you're over 65 years of age, 1 in 4 senior citizens in this country will be or have diabetes, and they expect it to grow. What I found was that it was very difficult. I was bombarded with so much information over 3 nights, 3.5 hours each night. I couldn't absorb it all. And so I really felt that it was important to me to get my own education. And I'm a very task-oriented person. And I started doing my testing, and we got all these parameters. And you take it 2 hours after a meal, and then you take it before exercise and after exercise, and you take it before you go to bed, and then first thing when you wake up in the morning. And I had great numbers after breakfast and the rest of the day, but I wake up in the morning with numbers that are not acceptable, and I've been extremely frustrated, if you would, of trying to deal with how to get those morning numbers down. You and I had started talking to these people at Barton Publishing last fall before I was even diagnosed as a diabetic, and they have a diabetes kit, which is an instructional kit. It's done electronically. It's made in 6 sections, and we entered into an agreement with them to, because it's such an important national health issue, to promote their diabetes kit on our program and make it available through our website. So they're really addressing the 6 major issues that people have to be concerned about: diet and exercise, medicine, and a bunch of other things. So that in one easy-to-read place, you get an opportunity to figure out how you can begin to manage your diabetes.
Well, there's so much conflicting information out there. Not so much, I think, conflicting as everybody has their own particular way of doing things. That's why I found the book extremely helpful. I've been dealing with it for over 20 years, and as you know, I talk about it at national conventions and on radio and TV, my own journey. But what I found in the book interesting is that they talk about things that I've only discovered along the way, some of which I wish I had discovered when I first became diabetic. My mother had diabetes, so the chances were 3 out of 4 that I would end up with diabetes.
You said that your aunts had it too, and your grandmother?
Oh, well, yeah. As far back as they could go. My grandmother was an immigrant to this country, so they have no knowledge before that of her family. But my mother was, in fact, for all intents and purposes, died of diabetes, as did one of my aunts. The complications of diabetes. But for instance, one of the things that I wish I had learned much earlier, and I have to thank my wife for this, is how important it is to walk, how important it is to be out there at least, some people say 2 or 3 miles a week. Other people say it doesn't matter the distance as long as you do it every day. And the material that we're talking about, that's why you and I are pushing this so much, is because we do know the consequences of not properly treating diabetes. Is the fact that if not properly treated, there are complications, amputation of limbs. It's funny, whenever I go to my doctor, who is absolutely one of the best internists in New York City, what does he do? He goes down and he takes off my socks and checks my circulation, because that's a key element in determining what's going on with diabetes. And then again, it's the pills versus insulin and other medical remedies. I myself have not, on the occasion when I've been in the hospital, reacted very well to diabetes, to insulin. And I take pills, a combination of 8 pills a morning and 3 at night, which keeps my A1C, which is, by the way, the measure of an important thing to consider. The 4 byproducts of diabetes are 1, high sugar, 2, high cholesterol, 3, high blood pressure, and 4, poor circulation. Those combination of things are what kill a goodly percentage of people. As someone once said, diabetes is a disease you can't cure, but will eventually kill you if you're not careful. So
we thought it was an important issue, and we're spending our airtime helping you understand why it's important to get control of your health. So this is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, If you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.